But we do begin this morning with the latest in that deadly mass shooting in Texas. The suspect still on the run this morning as more than 250 now officers from local, state and federal agencies continue the search for the man accused of fatally shooting 5 of his neighbors, including a 9-year-old child. Authorities investigated 2 possible sightings of the gunman yesterday, one of which prompted a lockdown of several schools, but neither tip panned out. Over the weekend, the sheriff's office and the FBI said searchers had recovered the gunman's rifle, cell phone, and some clothing, but they believe he may still have another weapon with him. Right now, there is an $80,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. Joining us now from Cleveland, Texas, NBC News correspondent Sam Brock. Sam, good morning. What's the state of the search here?
Willie, good morning. Right now, there is a thick fog surrounding Cleveland, Texas, to the point where you can barely see about 5 or 10 feet in front of you. Those are the conditions right now that investigators are trying to find Francisco Oropesa, who, of course, is accused of murdering 5 people. And, Willie, it is improbable, to put it mildly, if not completely implausible, that someone would have been asked to not fire their rifle on their lawn and turn around and murder 5 people next door. It is equally as improbable that that same person would be cornered by investigators within roughly a 2-mile search field and somehow be able to elude them. This was on Saturday. As you mentioned, Willie, his cell phone was being tracked, his clothes, there was a scent there. Somehow investigators found both, but not Oropesa. And so right now I'm standing in Cleveland. Over my shoulder, you see behind me the sign that says wanted for murder in Spanish, this man. All those mailboxes just next to it, Willie. This is a residential area. There are homes back there, but highly wooded. Mud roads leading to places where it's really hard to see where you're going. These are the sorts of topographical challenges that investigators, 250 plus of them, are still going for right now. We are going to be rubbing up against 96 hours with no answers. As you talk to people here, they are frightened, some of them, to leave their homes because they have absolutely no idea where this guy is. He could be somewhere in Texas. He could have left the country. Investigators have not provided an update. At least there was nothing yesterday other than the multiple false alarms that you had just specified, one of them at a local landfill, another near about 5 or 6 schools where there were sightings of someone who looked like Oropesa. There were incredible amounts of resources marshaled there to investigate. Turns out it was absolutely nothing. Now, Willie, it is also important to note that we've learned some devastating details from the father, Wilson Garcia, of that 9-year-old boy, Daniel, who was murdered. He says that he had contacted police, he and his family, 5 times over the course of about 30 minutes, and that it took that amount of time for police to come. Now, I believe he specifically said 20. His brother-in-law said 30 in another report, that he was inside of his closet. This is his brother-in-law calling police with his wife and child, telling them that there was an immediate need to get there, and that dispatcher said there's already folks on the ground. Of course, that was not the case. We've reached out to San Jacinto County to find out how long did it take them to get there and how many calls were actually placed. They have not been able to provide that information, but said they have 10 days with which to respond. But that's sort of what's going to happen in the aftermath. Right now, there's an immediate need, Willie, to find where this individual is. And as far as more of that background information comes into play, we also learned about the fact there was a pre-existing relationship between Wilson's wife, he says, and the wife of the suspect, that they were friends, and that the suspect himself, Oropesa, had come over to his house, he says, and helped him cut down a tree. So how do we get from that to what actually transpired on Friday at about 11:30, where there was a mass murder? And there are just so many questions that need to be pieced together with all of this. But Wilson Garcia also saying that his son saw his mother fall to the ground and tried to help her, and that's when the 9-year-old boy was shot. So inhumanity in every possible way as this urgent search continues now in day 4. And right now, no idea, at least no word from investigators as to where they stand in tracking down a murderer.
And in terms of that response time, Sam, we did hear, although the Sheriff's Department hasn't responded directly, that they only have about 3 sheriffs and sheriff's deputies that cover about 700 square miles. That could play into it, but a lot more questions to be answered there. What more do we know about the suspect, the man that police still now, all these days later, are looking for, Sam? Authorities say he was an undocumented immigrant from Mexico, had been deported at least 4 times. Questions there about how he got his hands on the guns. And then you touched on it a bit, but the relationship with the neighbors, as you say, it is unconscionable. What motive could there possibly be for such a horrific crime here?
Yeah, a lot of good questions there. In terms of just the relationship, you know, one of the neighbors of this family said, we sent our kids to school together, parties together, that Oropesa had done work for him. He said, I never heard him raise his voice, create any sort of consternation, and to think that he could commit this level of violence is outside the realm of possibility. So that was from someone who lived right next door to the murder suspect. With respect to your other question on the background of Oropesa, you're exactly right, Willie, that ICE yesterday confirming there were 4 examples of him being physically removed, deported from the country, twice in 2009, again in 2012, again in 2016, and there was also a DWI on his record dating all the way back to 2009, but that's of course small compared to the rest of the landscape of what we're talking about right now. But 4 deportations. Politicians, of course, jumped right in. Governor Abbott here in Texas discussing the illegal status, not just of the suspect in this case, but also of the family that was slaughtered. A lot of criticism after that as to why that was relevant in any way. John Cornyn, senator from Texas, also weighing in, saying that the actions of a criminal should not reflect tens or millions of law-abiding immigrants. But he also said that this is an example of how there are devastating impacts for not enforcing laws at our border. So you're seeing the politicization of the situation already, with some pushback, certainly. And then with respect to Oropeso's background, not just that, but also that there were calls to his house over the course of a certain period of time, the sheriff couldn't specify how many or when, of him discharging his rifle on the lawn of the house. So there was a history there, but not so much a criminal history. And again, just more of the mystery of how this one man could seemingly snap and commit this unconscionable act.
The search continues across Texas this morning. NBC's Sam Brock. Sam, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Mika.